Welcome back. The family of Junior Seau, former linebacker, is suing the NFL over the long-term brain damage that he suffered. They allege that the Seau's suicide it was a result of brain disease caused by the concussions that he suffered while playing pro football. Seau's ex-wife and 4 children, they filed a wrongful death suit yesterday. The suit alleges NFL failed to protect Seau from the dangers of hits to the head. Now, just this month, National Institute of Health announced that an examination of Seau's brain showed that he had CTE, that's a brain disease linked to repeated blows to the head, a disease which can cause memory loss, dementia, and depression. Seau died at the age of 43, a self-inflicted gunshot that he did to himself to the chest. Now, joining us now to explain the significance of not just the lawsuit, but also the consequences potential for football is Barry Wilner, football writer with the AP. Barry, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, Rich.
You know, in following this issue, concussions certainly aren't new to football, but as people know, even a casual observer, Junior Seau was one of the greatest linebackers of his generation. Now, I've talked to former players, including Harry Carson here, who say there's one thing with knowing that concussions were part of the game, but it's one of the things that you can't legislate out of the game. You will have head injuries. People are too big, they move too fast. Let's talk about some of the potential consequences in terms of insurability. We can go from the NFL, but this goes to all levels, from college to high school to Pee-wee. I think football's got a problem here, depending on how this and how that class action lawsuit shake out.
There's no question that there's a problem here for football, and it's not just at the pro level. You're right, Rich. It goes all the way down to the youth level, and USA Football, which runs youth football in this country, has been pretty proactive in recent years about trying to teach the right ways to tackle. But I think in the past, coaches have taught the wrong methods, and that's really hurt the players in the way that they prepare to play the game and the way they do play the game. So when they get to the pro level, they're used to leading with their helmets. They're used to putting their heads into the tackles. And through the years, it's now been discovered that that's the worst way to play the game. And we're talking about problems both in the way the game is played and also in the finances of this game, because if there winds up being some sort of a settlement at any level because of the concussions and what happens after the concussions to these players, we're talking about 10-figure type of numbers.
But Barry, I don't know what they can do about it. I mean, they've all but tried to make the quarterback untouchable. They put huge fines out for these players if they do helmet-to-helmet contact, but they just move too fast. Players aren't solitary objects here. They're moving too. And even if the NFL, which makes, what is it, $9–10 billion, okay? Even if they say, okay, we'll self-insure, what happens at D1, D2, D3, high school, Pee-wee football? You can't, there is not the wherewithal to protect themselves from lawsuits, especially if there's precedent. I really question the viability, depending on these outcomes, of football like you or I played even in high school. You're opening yourself up to a lawsuit with precedent now. I just don't know a way you get around it.
That's a very fair point, and I think one thing we will look at in the future, or see in the future, is that the NFL itself, if it remains so profitable, would need to help out on some of the other levels as far as the insurability of the game. But it's a very difficult situation because injuries are going to happen in any sport. But when a sport is plagued by these type of injuries, and it's been proven medically that and scientifically that we're seeing these injuries because of the methods and the ways that the games are played, that becomes a problem endemic to the sport. And when that happens, the sport could essentially disappear. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think that it's a problem the NFL is needs to be prepared to deal with, and not that far in the future either. A lot sooner than people would expect.
Yep.
Excuse me, people would expect.
Roger Goodell's got to be nervous on this one. Let me ask you the other issue everyone's talking about, and even the non-football fan now knows who Manti Te'o is, but talk about draft stock here for this kid. I got to think that NFL GMs who are averse to any kind of controversy, this guy's dropping like a stone on draft boards. You think he's going to have a surprise come draft day?
I think that what has happened in the last week or two has certainly hurt his stock. I spoke to several general managers. I've also spoken to some people who are outside of different teams but work for the league as consultants. One is Gil Brandt, who's probably the #1 NFL guru on the draft. And he believed all along that Tail was like a numbers 15 to 20 player. Now he wonders if Tail will go in the first round. He will get drafted. He's just too good a player not to get drafted. But there's so many questions now, not only about his off-the-field issues, but also, you know, how intelligent a player can be or a person can be to have fallen into some sort of trap like this, that general managers will be reticent to maybe pull the trigger on him. He will get drafted, though. There's no question about that.
Barry Wilner, thank you so much. I appreciate a few minutes.
Okay, Rich.
All right, let me bring the table back in on the Tail Fiasco soap opera, whatever the heck you want to call it here. I learned about catfish through this, all right? So now, anybody, you all know the story here. The guy with the fake girlfriend who died, but whom Tail claimed he was still speaking with in the run-up to the title game where Notre Dame got blown out by Alabama here. Turns out, as we know, the girl was never a girl. In fact, it was a guy who left voicemail messages with Tail and sounds pretty female here for whatever that's worth. They're going to have phone records. It seems, at least, from what we know, that he really bought into this thing. But maybe I'm from a generation that calls me a skeptic, but you don't go that long without meeting the girl. This isn't Republican, conservative, or liberal, or whatever. This is just... It's just done add up.
This is youth and stupidity, which will repeat cycle after cycle in generations. Why is this even a story?
Well, do you think it is youth and stupidity, or do you think that he knew this thing was a hoax from the get-go?
Youth and stupidity, a generation that's gotten a little more accustomed to meeting somebody on the internet, never a real person, Match.com, all these things. Here's what we really have. If you want to look at the story for what it is, they talk about the draft, what his numbers are. If Michael Vick can come back from what happened with him and playing in the NFL, you know why he came back? Because he could play the game. He's going to be drafted based on his ability to play his position. This is going to go away. It's embarrassing.
I think, Andrew,
it's
in some
foolish.
ways, in a locker room, what he did is going to be looked, whether it's right or wrong, even more harshly than what Michael Vick did with the dog ring.
He'll fit in perfectly when the Jets draft him.
Would you stop? You're a bad man.
There's part of this that, like, I've been trying not to pay any attention to this story because I don't want to care. Mm-hmm. But as part of the interview with Katie Couric today, he said that he was on the phone with her when she came out of her coma. Like, what are the odds that somebody handed her the phone while she was in a coma and she came out?
In a room where you're not allowed to use cell phones typically in a hospital. Look, this, you know what Katie Couric was? It was the setup for it's the press rebuilding. It's the Phil Mickelson apology before you have a controversy. This is just part of the press release.
Has Tail suffered from head injuries? Have we checked with that?
You know, Richard, I understand that young man is a Mormon. He's a fairly good-looking young man. But where I'm going with this is that I think there's something more to this than meets the eye that we don't know about yet.
But why do we care? I mean, how many people met somebody on the internet today?
Well, listen, everybody's got their own theories and stuff. I have a thought which will make this potentially a more interesting story. But if it ever, whatever. My only
2 years, Richard.
Now, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm old, but I'm not that old. I don't get it either.
Richard, I want to ask you a question.
You know why?
Have you ever dated someone where you forget kiss? You never talked.
You never met him in person.
You never met him in person, and you communicated via the internet for 2 years.
I was told I was too old because I didn't understand. I'm with you, Dominic. This thing is just bizarro.
Yeah,
all right.
Youth and stupidity will always be around. Move on to the next story.
We're going to take a break, and we will be moving on to the next story right after this.